at the last minute, right before we went on the air, to read The Doctor, played by Robert Picardo. And I had no idea at the time, because I was an ignoramus, that I was ripping off 50 years of British television. I simply did not know that there was a much more famous doctor with no name. So I look at, I now understand, I have now been enlightened, and I understand that I was borrowing from the mother country. So I'm here to apologize for that. Anyway, I'm delighted to be back in Scotland. I had haggis and eggs this morning for breakfast. I love it. I don't want to know what's in it. I understand it's a little unseemly, but I really enjoy it. And of course, I had 2 or 3 portions of dead pig as well, because that's what we do here. When we're in Britain, we eat several kinds of meat for breakfast. Makes me very happy. When I'm having a heart attack 3 weeks from now, I'll think of all of you. My daughter, Gina, who is now 23 years old and has been going to science fiction conventions since she was a little girl, is visiting with me. We went last night to the Stand, the comedy club. Had a great time, totally fun. They invited me on stage and made fun of me for 10 minutes. Because there was actually a comedian who did several jokes about Star Trek. Star Trek is an easily ridiculed franchise, as you know, because there's a lot of ponderous, what the hell are they saying kind of speech on Star Trek. We call it technobabble. Do you remember technobabble? The magnetic containment field that creates the illusion of my body can be modulated to allow matter to pass through it or be stopped if I direct it. Things like that. I still remember it. If you have questions, I would be delighted to answer them. I don't know how maybe you raise your hand, the microphone goes around. I would like to say that I recently was on stage with all of the Voyager cast for the first time in 13 years. We were all on stage together in Las Vegas, and that was quite wonderful and moving. We all really love each other, and it was terrific to have a reunion. We see each other individually and in smaller groups, but to have all 13. Were there 13 of us? No, it just seemed like that. To have all 9 of us together was quite a wonderful experience. So I'm happy to have had that this year. All right, I see. I'm going to let you pick the questioners.
Well, this guy's hand shot up before you mentioned it.
Okay, hello. As someone else who's politically challenged, was it why do you think they chose to have somebody who gives the appearance of wisdom and maturity rather than someone with a full head of hair to be the character of the Doctor?
Well, I think we know the answer to that, don't we? And now that you mention it, by the way, I'm about to go dark on Google Earth. Now they can't see me anymore. It does make you wonder. I mean, if my character, the Doctor, was supposed to be the face and image of everything we know about medicine in the 24th century, what do you suppose happened to Rogaine? Oh, they don't call it Rogaine here. What do you call the medicine that grows hair back? What's the name of it here in England? I mean, here in, Scotland, or Britain. You know what it is? The minoxidil, the thing that that regrows hair?
Just for me.
Nobody knows what I'm talking about.
No.
All right, well, there's a product in the States called Rogaine, and it's designed to grow hair back. And if indeed it works, I don't think the Doctor is a very good advertisement for that 300 years out. But I think that Star Trek, when the producers hired me, I said, do you want me as I am, or would you like me to wear a hairpiece? Because I had just done a Vietnam drama called China Beach, where I wore a beautiful head of hair. Because on American television in the 1980s, you didn't get to kiss girls if you were prematurely bald. I'm happy to say that Patrick Stewart ended all that. And the producer said to me, no, we want you just the way you are. We've had a great deal of success with bald men. So I put my hair pieces in the closet, and they pretty much remained there ever since. But yes, sir, I love what you've done with your hair as well. Do we have another?
At the back in the left hand side here.
There you go.
Hi.
The episodes featuring the Doctor were some of our favorite episodes of Voyager. Which particular episode was your favorite?
I guess I have 3 or 4 favorites in different categories. My favorite dramatic episode, I think, for the Doctor was called Latent Image. And in it, the Doctor basically has a conflict in his program, a nervous breakdown, if you will, over having saved one of his crew members over another. He had a Sophie's Choice situation where he either had to save Ensign Kim or another young crew member. I can't remember her name. I remember the actress quite well. And he chose Ensign Kim because he knew him slightly better. And then the other crew person had to die in the moment it took him to save Harry Kim, and he could not accept that his action had caused the death of one of the very people he was supposed to protect. It was he felt that he had violated the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm, which is the first, which is the ancient oath that any medical practitioner takes. First, do no harm. Don't hurt a patient in any of your treatment. And that was quite, I think, an exciting, dramatic episode for my character. I also love the romantic episode, Someone to Watch Over Me, where the Doctor is teaching 7 of 9 how to behave appropriately on a date, and he falls in love with his pupil. That was a very sweet one, very much like My Fair Lady and the relationship between Henry Higgins and I can't believe I forgot her name. What's the character's name?
Eliza Doolittle.
Yes, Eliza Doolittle. Thank you so much. I'm having those senior moments now more and more often. That's scary. But I think my all-time favorite might be Tinker, Tenor, Doctor, Spy, where the Doctor has adapted his program so he can have daydreams. I remember the producers called me and said, we're doing an episode where the Doctor is daydreaming. What would some of the Doctor's daydreams be? And I answered perhaps too quickly, sketching 7 of 9 in the nude. As if I'd already given it some serious thought. And that was a particularly fun episode. And I think my favorite scene that we ever shot on Voyager was the episode in the briefing room that occurs in the Doctor's imagination, where all 3 of our beautiful senior officers, 7 of 9, but ultimately the Doctor's attention, if you remember that. B'Elanna Torres is rubbing her naked foot against my ankle surreptitiously under the briefing room table. 7 of 9 is propositioning me via a pad, and then Captain Janeway trumps them all by walking around the table and complaining about lower back pain, and she places the Doctor's hand on the lowest lower back pain you've ever seen. It felt great to have my hand on the seat of power. That was the most fun I think I've ever had shooting that. I felt like Cary Grant, or Archie Leach, as you knew him. Do you remember Cary Grant, the great movie star, where he was so impossibly charming that all women fell in love with him? That was the only afternoon when I ever felt that way.
And still on this side, a question for Gemma next to him.
Hi there. One of my favourite films ever is Gremlins 2. I just wondered what it was like getting up close and personal with a gremlin like you did at the end.
I get asked this a lot. You haven't seen Gremlins 2. I play sort of the villain in that. He's the, I guess, the right-hand man of the Donald Trump-like investor character played by the great John Glover. And my character, a female gremlin, targets my character, Mr. Forster, for her romantic attention. And the final scene in Gremlins 2, which is probably the kinkiest thing I've ever been part of, the female gremlin dressed as a bride is approaching me in the men's room, where my clothes are partially torn off, and she, I guess, makes her romantic overture, which wins me over. If you look at the end of the movie, it looks like I'm finally going to accede to her romantic ardor, probably the craziest scene I've ever been part of. Which leads me to believe if they reboot the Gremlins franchise, there might be an offspring that is half human and half gremlin at the beginning of the movie, but no one has approached me to play the father of that particular creature. It was a lot of fun. My main recollection of shooting Gremlins, because the Gremlin was so tiny, there was a scene where I was to have lipstick marks all over my leg, as if she had torn my pants off and kissed me all over my leg. Now, in any other movie, they would have simply made a stamp, a little stamper with female lips on it, dipped it in red ink, and stamped my leg. But I don't think that the prop men either had the foresight to do that, or perhaps they thought the stamp didn't look real enough. So there was a second assistant prop woman who was a very pretty girl in her mid-20s, and at the time I was probably in my mid-30s, and her job was to put lipstick on and kiss me all over my naked leg. That was a good day too. I asked her, I said, are you okay with this? Because I think that we could, I didn't want her to be uncomfortable. She was absolutely fine with it. Haven't met anyone like that since. But anyway, it was also a special day for me. And she grew up to be a very, very successful prop master in her own right. She works on many of the best shows on television, and we have joked about this in front of her husband and children a number of times since this, because this was some time ago.
Question for this gentleman here.
Hi, yeah, you mentioned earlier on the episodes you shot with 7 of 9 and the plot arcs, and I always enjoyed those ones because the character development that came out of those. I was wondering, you always had a very good relationship on screen, it seemed, with Jerry Ryan played in 7 of 9. Was the story arc driven by the fact that you seem to have that very good sort of personal chemistry together, or were the characters always intended to go that way from the start, and it was sort of a happy accident that you got on so well?
I can't call it a happy accident because I pretty much engineered it, and I'll tell you how. When I got the news that the producers had decided to take the Kess character off the show, I mean, in all fairness to Jennifer Lean, there was a flaw in the concept of the Ocampan character Kess. They only had a 7-year lifespan, which incidentally is the contract lifespan of the Star Trek series, 7 years. So that would mean that if she looked very young in the pilot, by season 3 she should look middle-aged, and by season 6 she should be in advanced old age. So I think they realized that they had painted themselves into a corner. If you recall, in the pilot of Voyager, you meet other Ocampans who look like they're middle-aged actors. They look in their late 30s, early 40s. Well, they were probably 3 years old in Ocampan language, and Kess was probably 1.5 years old, or 2 years old. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that was a problem I think the writers didn't quite know how to deal with. In any case, they had made the executive decision to take the Kess character off the show and introduce a new character. And I went to our producer, Brannon Braga, and I said, I'm concerned because Kess has been the Doctor's emotional mentor. She has been listening to him and encouraging this other side of him that none of the other crew had experienced at that point. At the same time the Doctor was mentoring her in her medical training, she was actually mentoring the Doctor in his desire to be more human-like. And if you remember when the Doctor has his first date on the holodeck with the horribly disfigured Vidian woman, it's Kess who basically teaches him to follow his heart, so to speak, his holographic heart. In any case, when I heard that the Doctor was going to lose his sounding board, I expressed some concern to Brannon Braga, and he said, well, why don't you think of a way the Doctor can relate to our new character, 7 of 9. And when I first saw Jerry Ryan, like any man, I could think of one way that I'd like to relate to 7 of 9, but it didn't seem appropriate somehow because of our age difference. So I suggested to Brandon about a week later after I'd thought about it, suppose we take the relationship between Kes and the Doctor and we turn it around. And the Doctor feels that he is the best candidate to teach 7 of 9 how to regain her humanity from having been a Borg. In other words, he's a better teacher of how to be human than a human. That struck me as quite funny because the Doctor was arrogant and overblown and full of himself, and it made complete sense that he would have the ego to assume that he would be the perfect person to teach her how to behave as she reintroduced herself into human society. So I specifically suggested to them that we have scenes with role-playing exercises where I teach her appropriate behavior under different situations. And they took that idea and ran with it, and it really was the 4-year arc that my character had with 7. And it culminated in the episode I've already spoken of, Someone to Watch Over Me, where the Doctor is teaching 7 how to behave on a date. And he falls in love with her while she is singing You Are My Sunshine, because singing is something that is a hobby of the Doctor's. It means a great deal to him. And when he hears her sing for the first time, he is smitten. So I am proud and delighted to have made that particular suggestion because it gave me so many scenes with Jerry. And the scenes were often funny, but they were also quite dramatic at times. And Jerry, in addition to being stunning looking, as we all know, is a terrific actress and played a very unique character. So I felt that my scenes with Kate and with Jerry were my favorite scenes in the show. The Doctor and the Captain had a natural built-in conflict because Captain Janeway was more reticent than anyone else in the crew, really, to accept the Doctor as an individual, as an equal. I don't think she even realized her own defensive about it. So I had many wonderful scenes with Kate, where the issue of what constitutes an individual's rights and what constitutes humanity were the large issues we were grappling with, and they were very exciting scenes to play as well. And Kate is an extraordinary actor to work with. I've never met anyone more dedicated, more prepared. I mean, when Kate showed up on the set, I've never seen an actor who never needed to check the script. And a long shooting day where she had 12 pages of dialogue, she did not even carry the script to the set. It was back in her dressing room. It was all in her head every day. Whereas I had the script right off camera and kept checking and rechecking my lines. She never had to look. It was all there from the moment she learned it. And that's something I admired a great deal.
I have a question on the back.
If you had to shoot another episode of Star Trek Voyager, would you? And what would the plot be about?
Boy, I guess geriatric holograms. I know that Brent Spiner shared the same concern about his own characters. We both play characters that could not age on the show because Data was an android and the Doctor being a hologram. Obviously, his program could have easily been altered for him to age if it made his patients and his fellow crew members more comfortable for him to change along with them. That would have been a much easier adjustment to be made with a piece of software than with Data, who would have had to have his face re-engineered every year, right, to change it because it was because it was real and not a projection. But and that's one of the sadness about not being able to kind of go back and play the role because I mean. I think the best way to do it, frankly, would be to act as myself and to have it digitally corrected so that I look 20 years younger, the way they did with Patrick Stewart and Sir Patrick and Sir Ian, although at the time I don't think Sir Patrick had been knighted. In the X-Men sequel, where they made them look 25 years younger, due to digital correction frame by frame. I haven't really answered your question. What would it be like? I once pitched a story to the producers that was never made, where the Doctor traveled back in time to San Francisco in 1902 or 1903, the year of the Great San Francisco earthquake. I don't know if you know this, historically, the great Caruso, the most famous Italian opera tenor, perhaps of the 20th century, was in San Francisco at the time of the earthquake. So I created a story with a friend of mine about the Doctor falling in love with a woman who was campaigning for the woman's right to vote, a suffragette. But he also met and competed with the great Caruso as far as an opera singer. It was a silly but fun idea, and also had a nice romantic twist to it. However, it was never made. So if I ever got to do another Voyager episode, I think it would be fun to do that one. I am the first actor to ever get a writing credit on one of the Star Trek series, live action series, not the animated series, for an episode called Lifeline, where the Doctor and his creator, Lewis Zimmerman, have a big meeting and a conflict, like a father-son drama between an engineer and his technological offspring. That was based on a story of mine with my writing partner, John Bruno.
A question here in the front.
Hello there, hi. Just curious, out of Stargate Sg-1 and Atlantis, which one of the two is your favourite to work for, and who is your favourite co-star?
Have you included Star Trek and both Stargates?
I was actually going to say Star Trek as well, but it's really just out of the
Stargate. Well, if you had included Star Trek, it wouldn't be a fair comparison, simply because the role went on for 7 years, and I had so many different wonderful scripts. But what was fun about Stargate was that it was the whole experience felt like a gift. I didn't have to earn the job the way I did on Star Trek through the traditional audition process. Stargate, they simply took my work from Star Trek and they were fans. And I was hired just to be a one-time villain, to work one day. And the producers, after they created this very unlikable character, Richard Woolsey, they decided they liked me as an actor and they wanted to have me back, but they had kind of painted themselves into a corner by creating such an unlikable character. So when they did have me back, every time they very slightly improved Mr. Woolsey from a total douchebag to a slightly more palatable douchebag. So, and eventually, they redeemed him to the point where they offered me the job of being the commander on Atlantis. Both casts were terrific. The Stargate Sg-1 cast, and that is, remember, the longest running individual scientific series, science fiction series in the States. It's run longer than any individual Star Trek. Sg-1 ran 10 seasons. Led by Richard Dean Anderson, who is a delight to be around, very funny, very, self-effacing, really great guy. But the whole cast, up and down, were terrific to me that first day I met them, including, Don, who we lost far too young, was so all gracious and very respectful to me. And every time I came back, they were always happy to see me and welcome me back. But I think that on Atlantis, I guess because my character had become more likable, but from the inside, he was somebody who was really trying to change. He was trying to reinvent himself in middle age, and that's what made him fun to play. He recognized that he wasn't a leader naturally, that his job had been to really criticize other people's leadership. He was an armchair quarterback, not a real quarterback, as we say in the States regarding our football. And I think that seeing somebody trying to improve himself and reinvent himself at that stage of life became a compelling story. And what was great about Star Trek after working on I get them mixed up myself. Star Trek was a very carefully controlled franchise by the producers. You didn't change a word of dialogue unless you had permission. Stargate was much looser because it was set in the present, even though it was science fiction and it was a secret program, that it was set in the present, so they were not afraid of you seeming contemporary. Star Trek, the producer's big fear is that they let the actors change the lines to make them more comfortable, that they'll suddenly seem more of the moment, more contemporary. And they wanted to keep this show in this sort of mythical future. So they were very careful not to have any regionalisms in speech, not to have, I mean, other than our British, Captain Picardo, but they didn't have regional American speech. We didn't sound like we were from a particular part of the United States. It was all sort of mid-Atlantic speech and no contemporary expressions. And they're very careful, and I respect that. But Stargate, once I went on, was like a holiday because I could ad-lib. I could say to the director, can I try something else? And we would just shoot it a different way. And that was a fun freedom, having worked in the other franchise for so long. So, but I wouldn't distinguish between Stargate Sg-1 or Atlantis. I had a great time on both shows. I will say that David Hewlett made me laugh more than any other actor I think I've ever worked with. He just is so funny. And he's hilarious when he complains, and he complains a lot.
And you got to say the last words in Stargate Atlantis. How did that feel?
That felt great. I think that was a special gift to me from Joe Malazzi and Paul Muley, the two writer-producers of Stargate who promoted me in the franchise from just a guest star to a regular. They were my great friends in that among that production team, and I think that he gave me the last word was really something that Joe, he mentioned it to me, that I had the last word of the whole series, and I was very flattered and delighted by that, and I think that's a very sweet scene, the final moment of the show. So, and Joe has a new, Joe and Paul have a new series, Dark Matter, on Sci-Fi, which is doing very well. Has anybody seen it? Good for you. Keep watching it. I hope someday, if they can figure out a way to introduce a middle-aged bald man on that show, they will. He's a very loyal friend, and I love working with those two guys very, very much.
And we got time for one final question for this gentleman here.
In Star Trek First Contact, you reprised the role of the Doctor as the generic emergency medical hologram saving the Crusher against the board. How was that compared to your performance as the Doctor in Voyager?
What was fun about my moment in First Contact was it was a reboot of the Doctor. It was exactly the way the Doctor would have been in the pilot episode, because he had not been used before on board the Enterprise. The fact that I'm in First Contact, I'm going to tell you briefly that story of how I happened to be in the show, our show, and as I was leaving, having had the conversation I went for, I said to him, you're writing the next movie script for the first one is dedicated to the Next Generation cast. He said, yes. I said, and at the end of Star Trek Generations, you destroyed the Enterprise, so you'll have a brand new Enterprise. He said, that's true. I said, well, I don't understand something. How come Voyager has more advanced technology than your flagship, the Enterprise? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, how come we have this emergency medical hologram thing and they don't have one? I said, I'm not trying to pad my part, I'm just looking out for your logic here. And he smiled and said, well, why would they all look alike? I said, it's the first generation of a new piece of technology. Why wouldn't they all look alike? It would be like a popular screensaver. Everybody had the same one. And he laughed and said, that's a very interesting idea. A couple weeks later, I was having dinner with Ron Moore, and I said, you and Brandon are writing the new script, and he said, yes, that's true. I said, you know, I don't understand something. I went through the whole thing again, and he said, that's a very interesting idea. A week or two after that, Brandon Braga, same thing, ran into him, and I'm talking to him, and I said, you and Ron are writing the script for the new Star Trek movie. He said, yes. I said, you know, I don't understand something. Did the whole thing with him. He said, that's a very interesting idea. Okay. 3 or 4 weeks after that, Jonathan Frakes calls me in my dressing room and says, I want to thank you for helping get me the job of directing first contact. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the studio had to approve me as a director, so they showed them the episode I did of Voyager with the Doctor feature called, I can't remember. Anyway, the Doctor wakes up on the ship and he thinks he's the only human and everyone else is a hologram. Okay. So I said, well, thank you for crediting me with me helping you get the job, but, you know, I'm sure you got it on your own, but you know, I don't understand something. I went through the whole thing again, and the conversation ended with him saying, that is a very interesting idea. All right, 2 weeks after that, I got a call from Rick Berman in my trailer, and he said, we decided to put MH in the new Star Trek movie. And I said, that's a very interesting idea. Thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Robert will be signing out his table right away, giving photos with us. Gentlemen, if you wish to do that, you can find out more information in the signing tables. And up next, we have a really interesting panel featuring all the anime and some very cool anime guests that will be with us in time. Don't go